Good day, welcome to Great White Retro. I'm Gord Fessick, and I seem to be without my pets today, so I guess it's just my topic. I'm going to salvage some pieces off of here, do a little bit of dremeling. Hello, Star. Good day, welcome to Great White Retro. I'm Gord Fessick, this is my wife's cat, Star, and our topic today...
Welcome to Great White Retro. I'm Gord Fessick, and somewhere in the shot is my wife's cat, Star, who made an impromptu visit a moment ago. Our topic today is this jigsaw puzzle of an Atari 800. This computer works really well, but it is missing some chunks off of the top cover, and the corner seems to have also taken a significant knock. To try to correct this, I have all of the pieces that John Bumstead from Roadkill Incorporated was able to recover for this, but I think some pieces are missing from there, so I acquired a replacement Atari 800 case from an Atari Age forum member, and I'm going to try to attempt to repair the front cover with pieces carefully chopped out of this top cover here. With any luck, we'll get this thing whole again, and then we'll go clean the keyboard, do some retrobrighting, and just get this thing looking a lot better. Let's get her done.
So as I explained, this Atari 800 came from Roadkill Incorporated. It was a project computer, kind of in pieces. John Bumstead was able to recover a lot of the pieces, but some of them were still missing, as you'll soon see. It's otherwise in remarkable shape. It had an odd RAM card in there at first, which caused it to not work, but replacing it with standard Atari 400 RAM cards seemed to take care of that. That label is going to be problematic when I go to attempt the cleaning and retrobrighting. You can see the top left has taken a significant knock there, and that messes with the ports. The Atari 8-bit machines, at least the early ones, were interesting in that you had to remove the top cover by removing the bottom first. So you would actually pull the computer out from the bottom up. And then this keyboard was a bit of a problem, of course. I had to take it out a different way. I kind of had to fold the computer open to be able to detach the keyboard properly, and then I was able to remove the keyboard safely. These keys here are actually part of the motherboard. There are switches on there, unlike on the 400, where they're part of the keyboard. So in theory, you could have not a keyboard and just have these key switches and be able to play games on this computer. So not bad. Let's see if we can do something about that. This bottom half has a few missing pieces. There's that corner again. But there were other missing pieces on here as well. This top cover is a bit of a mess. It has lots of small pieces missing. The RF shield on the front door is missing. To be able to separate these two halves, I had to remove this top plate, and one of the screw stocks snapped off, so I'm going to have to try to fasten that as well. These hinges, they're not fastened in place aside from that metal cover, but they are a pretty tight fit, so I had to wiggle this free very carefully without breaking anything, and then I could remove those two springs. So yeah, this is a little busted, but I have a cunning plan to put this thing back together.
So this is my cunning plan. I'm pretty sure I have this piece, so I shouldn't have to do anything with that aside from repair it. For this section, I think I'm going to attempt to Dremel off all of this from here, or a good chunk of it. I will cut to the point where I can file these back to the point where I can fit them reasonably close. I'll try to make them as flat as possible. So I will end up just taking a big chunk out of here and taking a big chunk out of here and just replacing one chunk with another.
One neat thing I found out was that I can use other pieces of the old case as a guide, or as we call them in Canada, we call them a jig, to line up these vent pieces. And so I was able to do that. Then I could apply some acetone over the joints. Acetone will slightly dissolve the plastic, and then as the acetone dries, it will chemically bond to the other plastic pieces. Yeah, that's just straight up nail polish remover. And that's something you can find locally at almost anywhere. So as a test, I'm trying out this busted piece here off of the donor case. I shouldn't have just done that, though. I should have just taken a cotton swab, because as you'll see, it left a mark on my cutting board. But it did successfully bond it. However, some of the acetone did leak out the bottom, and some of the dissolved plastic also came out. So I would have to take a file afterward, but I have a plan to deal with that. Yeah, that's just showing what we're running into. But I have a plan to deal with that. Anyway, let's try with this first bit first. I lined it up using my jig earlier, and now I'm just going to dab acetone over the joints. That one's a little bit open, so acetone will flow in there. The other side isn't going to be as easy, but we'll get that in there. You might be able to see that as I apply acetone, the parts of the case that are exposed to it will brighten up some. Here comes the Dremel. So this is where I'm going to cut away the damaged bits so that I could replace it with the other bits from the donor case. I'm attempting to cut narrower on this and wider on the other, and that way I only have to file outward over here or file inward on the other one to try to get the fit right. And I am using a nail file for the detail work.
Now I just need to cut a matching piece from here.
Here we go on the donor lid. This took some time. Don't worry, I had safety glasses on for this. That Dremel is the battery-operated one. Since I'm only dealing with plastic, it's okay, but if I were dealing with metal or wood, I wouldn't want to use the cordless Dremel. I would use the corded one. That is a plastic cutting disc as well, so no issues there. There we go. It's taking shape. I just have to trim that to fit now. You can bet Bridget wasn't impressed, but I managed to clean up everything when I was done. And I broke off a couple pieces there, but hey, we'll fix that.
Okay, so disaster averted. Let's see how this piece fits. Okay, so I think I need to file this down a bit, but we're otherwise getting there. Yeah, oh, and then these pieces are moving on me again. Okay, so I'm using one of these other busted pieces to hold the two pieces that I broke off in place. I dabbed some more acetone over the joints on both sides. I'm going to let this dry out. Then I think I'm going to use a similar technique to hold these pieces in place, right? So that these don't go anywhere. while they are chemically welding. But we are getting very close. Okay, so I've made some progress. This is my piece, and here's how it will fit. I can continue to use these as jigs to hold it all in place.
Well, here we go. Let's get some fresh acetone out there first. I get both the piece that's going to go in here and the outer edge. There we go. Let's line that up. You'll notice that the bottom isn't quite lined up. It's actually got too much material removed. But I tried to bridge that gap and wasn't very successful the first time. You'll see what that looks like in just a bit. Here I was thinking, oh, acetone will just flow and bridge the gap. No, acetone does not do that. If you're going to try that sort of thing, then just wedge some loose plastic bits in there and then trim the excess plastic off later. There we go. We'll let that dry out and we'll see what we can do with the rest of the case.
This is the bottom half of the original case, and I think I was able to find all of the bits and pieces. I'm going to try to file that down later on to make it a little cleaner. I was able to find all the pieces of this corner. I found this piece here was loose, and I was able to restore it. There were some other cracks that I just filled in with some acetone and acetone plastic mix to try to kind of fill in the holes as such. And this one here has the label intact. I removed the smaller label that was underneath it. So the bottom half is fine. The top half is not so much because I was able to find almost every piece except for this piece here, which is, who knows where that is. I bet it was lost. So I'm going to use the top half of the donor case, but the bottom half of the original case.
So now that we've let the acetone here cure, we'll try to remove our jigs from here. They're a little tight, and of course some acetone dripped onto them, so I was just being really careful removing that. It's not quite lined up, but I can file that away. And this excess stuff here, I tried to remove a little bit of it. Yeah, we'll just file that down when the time comes. But the vent holes were not quite so great.
Alright, let's be honest. I don't like this at all. This is... Look at that. I'm not going to keep this. I think I'm going to instead attempt to retrieve these vent pieces from the other side of my donor case. And I'm also going to try to get some of this support material out as well.
Well, here we go. I am removing the unsuccessful vent hole pieces. You could see that that other end just kind of came apart. Any significant mass, and that would have just fallen apart. Let's get this filed down so that I can insert some replacement vent hole pieces. I'm again using the other case to help guide these other pieces in place. I will clamp this in, and then once I know those pieces are lined up, I'll use some tape to hold them on this side. I'll then use a jig on the top side to make sure they stay lined up. I will use acetone on one end of it while the other end's being held in place by my jig. And then I'll move the jig over and get the acetone on the other side. You notice there's some gaps in there, but I'm going to use loose bits of plastic to fill in those holes this time. You can see that there, and I can use my Dremel to smooth that out later.
Alright, so what I ended up doing was I used some loose bits of plastic as filler. As long as I have the gaps filled, I can always etch around them later. Here's an example of a gap I can fill. There you go, dab that in some acetone, stuff it in there, and hope to hell it's enough to fill the hole. And we'll let this dry and cure and deal with it in the morning.
The end result was much better, and that's not a wire brush, by the way, on the Dremel. That's a... I don't know what that material is, but it's not metal. But moving fast enough, I was able to remove the excess plastic. I was even able to fill in the top bits there. And that's still not perfect, but at least it's stronger. Next, now that the case is repaired, it's time to clean it up and try to retrobright it. I'm trying my best to protect this label. I'm using a piece of a sandwich bag and then tape on top of that, so that way I can remove the plastic later without damaging the label. But this didn't quite work out because the case has this texture on it. It's not a perfect watertight seal. So even with the nice packing tape from the local post office, it wasn't enough to keep the moisture off of that label. And there's this hole on the bottom too I had to cover up. But I tried my darndest. I don't know if you noticed while I was doing the acetone repairs, but any place that acetone touched actually brightened up the case in those spots. So it's apparent to me that this case needs some retrobright, especially since the top half is from the donor case, and it was slightly more yellowed than the original machine was. So I'm going to give this thing a nice scrub, and I'm going to just do a nice deep retrobright project on this. I probably should have put the case back together so it would have been easier to handle. But I was able to at least get it cleaned out. Use an old toothbrush for the air vents and for the top part of that case. Yeah, there we go. Atari sure knew how to make things interesting. And you may notice that it was a little darker there as well. I attempted using a heat gun in there, so that's why it's a little dark. But when I've used a heat gun before, retrobright will take care of that. Now here I am trying to remove the remaining adhesive from the inside of the top door, but it just was not coming off. WD-40 was finally able to remove that adhesive. And something else, you may not be able to see it on camera, but I could sure see that underneath this adhesive, the plastic was a lot brighter than the surrounding plastic. So, yep, this case definitely needed some retrobright. Then there's this black spot on the front of the front door. I could not get that off of there with any chemicals. It just took a lot of abrasive scrubbing. And even after alcohol and baking soda, I was left with this dot. Well, that'll be a distinguishing mark for my Atari 800. And yeah, I'm trying to show the difference, but yeah, there's a slight contrast here. Now let's remove this label. I was able to get replacement fonts and such. Thanks so much to the folks at Atari Age for finding the right matching typefaces. I could make a replacement label if I had to using 3.5-inch floppy labels trimmed to fit. But I thought I would try this first. Unlike on the Atari 1200 XL, I soaked this label in alcohol first, and that helped. A nice sharp blade afterward was able to get this label off. So I'll keep that safe in some paper towel to absorb all the alcohol. And you'll see the end result of that when it dries off. There we go. So the label is intact. Well, not bad. Let's put that away until we're ready to put it back on the case. While the retrobrighting was going on, I took this keyboard apart to be able to clean the keys. For as far as I could tell, the keys were all working just fine. This keyboard uses stack-pull key switches, similar to a terminal that Adrian's Digital Basement featured only a few days ago. I was like, I didn't know what kind of keyboard this was, and now I know. The keys were really easy to remove without risking any damage to the keyboard. So all I really needed to do was get the keys off. I could use a dry brush to sweep up the inside of the keyboard, and then a slightly damp cloth to wipe off all 5 sides of those keys. Not bad at all. Just a dry brush to do some dusting. Alright. And I know some of you like watching the key montages, so here you go. I did cut it a little short though, for brevity at least. There we go, one more. And then the little LED light extender thing. Oh, I have 2 of them in there. Of course, because I took it off the donor case as well. Alright, next let's get that spacebar on there and begin reattaching all the keys. I took a photo beforehand and I was using that as a reference. I did get some of the cursor keys wrong, but I was able to correct that without too much trouble.
And hey, why not? Let's get the Atari key in there last.
And with that, let's get to the retrobrighting. Now, I actually put this case in the peroxide solution before I worked on the keyboard, but here you can see me trying to insert it. I fully reassembled the case, and I put a rock inside the keyboard hole to try to keep it down there. But after the first day of retrobrighting, it wasn't bad, but it wasn't done either. Here I am comparing it with an Atari 410 cassette drive that I retrobrighted several months ago. So it's close, but not close enough. On the next day, though, I went and did the peroxide paste. And you can see here that the top covers from the donor case and the good case have a sharp contrast. Alright, this is the retrobrighted piece. The top piece is showing a little bit of splotching, but I'm hoping to correct that with a clear coat in a moment. This is in pretty good shape now. This is a much closer match to the color that I saw on Adrian Black's thumbnail for the Atari 800. On the bottom half, we've got the corners fixed. That too is a little off color, but that's going to get fixed with the clear coat. I'm going to clear coat both sides. There is this strip down here. That's this thing. But that's from the label that was there, and I'm going to cover that up with the same label when the time comes. So that'll take care of that. The top grill, well, it could be better, but now the color is a match. And, well, you can tell that it's been damaged and then repaired. But at least you can tell that it's been repaired, or at least attempted to be repaired. Finally, there's the flap that goes with it. I've masked off the Atari labels so that I can clear coat this. That one spot just refuses to come off, and I'm not going to do anything more to it. I think that'll just be a distinguishing mark for my Atari 800. Well, here we go. We're going to try clear coating this to try to fix a few of the blemishes that are left over. There I am, suited up, ready to go. This room was very well ventilated, so no panic there. This clear coat is a matte finish. Curiously, this clear coat is mostly acetone, so it's going to dissolve the plastic ever so slightly and take care of those Retrobright blemishes. The instructions say to come back after about 15 minutes between coats. It was a very fast drying clear coat, but I'm going in all four directions here. I wound up doing the top coat 3 times on the top half, and then twice on the bottom. I flipped all these pieces over and I did the underside as well. I remembered to keep the latch for that top door flap there, including that in the clear coat process. Then I'm doing the insides as well for completeness. So yeah, 3 coats exterior, 2 coats interior, and a lot of ventilation later, and we got these looking a lot better, even better than they did after the Retrobright. Before we put this back together, let's give the 800 a thorough test. Without the speaker hooked up, and without the case, we need to tape over that switch, but we do get all the keys working. The display is a little blown up. Apparently the original Atari 800 ran its Luma signal pretty hot, so that's why it's as washed out as it is. But we can adjust that on the monitor. I'm not going to worry about it for this. But everything seems to be working fine. We'll try something from the A8 Pico cartridge just to make sure it behaves.
Okay.
You'd think I know how to play Centipede. Alright, let's try something from floppy disk. Well, so far so good. I don't have the snack adapter to hook up a Super Nintendo controller, though. That would have been nice. And because I'm so used to the Super Nintendo controller, I don't remember what the keyboard controls are. Oops. I don't know what the controls are. Well, now that it's behaving, let's get it back together. Much like I did on the Atari 400, I used this double-sided mounting tape to reattach the RF shield to the front door flap. But like last time, I struggled getting the backing off of there, so I just cut to removing the backing. That goes in there. All of the RF shielding is intact on this Atari 8. Let's get those door springs back on there. I used a regular kitchen knife to spread the springs apart a little bit so that I can get it over the hinges. There we go. There's one. Here's the other. And this does just slip into place. It's a pretty tight fit, but it's not fastened like. And I am trying to line up the springs. Come on. I do get it eventually. After I get the hinges in place, I put a little bit of lithium grease in there to help lubricate it, because it was a bit stuck. It didn't need much though. Next, let's get the RF shield for the rest of the top cover in place. I was able to use acetone to fasten that one screw stock back into place, although it did give me some trouble. Fortunately, it held in place even though that bottom left screw was still loose. There we go. Here's the top half of the case. That's the door hook, or whatever that thing is. Here's a metal bar that's used as a spring for that catch. I was able to just put this in there by hand. There we go. Nice. That catch is holding and springing just fine. Let's get these keys in place. And finally, little LED extender. Trying to put the whole computer in, that didn't work out. I wound up unfolding the keyboard cable like this so that I could fasten the keyboard first, followed by the rest of the computer. Man, Atari sure made their computers into tanks. That speaker stopped working. I ended up grabbing a spare speaker from an old Apple IIe to replace it. Here's the bottom half of the case. Let's get our label back on there. I'm going to bring it a little higher up so it still covers that hole but gives me a little more room on the smooth part. I'll use some of that post office packing tape, just like I did on the 1200 XL, to protect this label. If I ever have to take this computer apart again, I now know that I can make a reproduction label. Using a spatula to get all the air bubbles out. There we go. This is that second label that came on there. I used some double-sided tape to put it back, and I ended up covering that as well. I wanted to protect this. I don't know what that information means on that label, but I figured it was important enough to be on the computer for 45 years. We'll make sure that it stays with the computer. There we go. Finally, let's mate the bottom half with the top half. There was one more label that was on the side on the RF shield, so I put that back as well. Here comes the bottom half. With that, we just have to put our cover on the top There are those tabs that fit into some guide holes on the top part of the RF shield. Once those go in, I'm able to put back those two catches that allow for removal of this top cover without using tools. All that's left now is to remove the protective cover off of those badges.
And we're done.
So this is it. This is the Atari 800, slightly damaged, considerably yellowed. And here's the aftershot. A lot brighter, whole again, in one piece, and ready for some modern games. Beauty. Just in time for Christmas.
I couldn't find any pokey Christmas music to close out this video with, but I at least found this demo here, which is pretty much Great White Retro's namesake. And even though some of the folks at Atari Age may not approve of the Retrobright methods, I don't believe they can argue with the result. This Atari 800 is in as close to perfect shape as I can get it, considering that it was in pieces when I got it from Roadkill Incorporated. It's at the right factory color, it's been clear coated, there's no Retrobright blemishes, and it's good to last, hopefully, another 45 years. Also, in January and February, I will be at the Shawano Indoor Flea Market hosted by Zirco Promotions every Saturday starting at 8 a.m. at the Shawano Community Hall right near Associated Bank. We're there. Maybe even you'll want to pick up some old retro equipment that has gone through my testing process and is working perfectly. And finally, on March 1st, right before the Green Bay hosted NFL Draft, I will be at Collectrubilia, 8 a.m. at the Resch Expo. Same place as we've been for the past couple of visits. Hopefully we'll see you at one of these events. Until then, good day, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year.